very much. I think we've said a lot here, but I'd like to open it up to you now to ask questions. So.
Ryan, yeah, right. I live in Balmullet, so you have somebody else
Probably related
from Balmullet as well. And just Thomas, a short one for you in terms of the Mayo team. Is there anything you could do with one's expertise? Mayo Sam McGuire.
Yes.
So I don't know if Tom is up to date in that, but Mayo have been there or thereabouts for a number of years now. A wonderful team, but just don't seem to make it to the final crossing.
Well, we in Cleveland have a significant amount of experience with
Yes.
falling short in contests. It's interesting to see. I shouldn't make light of it. I grew up in an industrial city, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Some of its most difficult times when import was decimating the steel industry in the 70s. Yet the football team and the baseball team were champions. And the community identity that rallies around sports teams, I think, is sometimes diminished. It is part of your fabric if you embrace it. You know, our communities are still our most important asset, I believe. We're blessed here in Cleveland, I think, with a great local patriotism and civic pride. I think that's gotten us through some of the most difficult economic times that have faced the quote-unquote Rust Belt or the industrial Midwest. So I wish I had the secret formula to promote that, yet a rallying point that is probably part of every conversation around every dinner table or restaurant or pub and in our workplace. It's still something of great pride. So whether the wins and losses are favorable or not, it's still an amazing thing to have community assets like hospitals and schools, like churches and sports teams. I still think it's, you know, what makes us, you know, special.
My real point is around the centralization and the privatization of I think it's wonderful what's being done in innovation and the centres of excellence and all that. But you know from Balmullet, where it's placed geographically, it's a 6-mile round trip to get to the centre of excellence. And the big problem I have as a county councillor in Mayo is that every day I am on the phone pleading with teams in Galway for beds. People who have really aggressive types of cancer, they cannot get the beds to get the treatment, and then there's a huge waste as a result of that. So there's a real apartheid developing in terms of access to health in Ireland. And I'm very interested in what you're saying around the technology and the developments there, because what was supposed to happen in terms of the primary care was that there was to be a real investment in technology there that would address some of the problems that were coming up. Getting back to Balmullet again, you'll see even from there, half of the beds in Balmullet Hospital were closed down, and that has resulted in the acute hospitals not having the step-down facilities as well. So everything is leading into everything else. I don't wish to be negative about it, but I think as we innovate more and more, we have to think of the people who know about these innovations and the wonderful things that are happening, but they cannot access it because of where they live geographically and because of the amount of money that they have. And that is wrong, and I think we need to be addressing that at the same time as everything else. Just the other thing around the jobs and the immigration, 700,000 people have immigrated since 2008 from Ireland, so it is an ongoing problem. How we get them back is we get the jobs. What concerns me around the pharmaceutical industry is the patent cliff again, and you might talk maybe a little bit around that and around some of the challenges there and how we can address that. I know research and development will do some of that, but that's a real problem. And obviously what's going to feed into that as well is the moves to do away with the double Irish and the changes in the taxation system there in terms of pharmaceuticals again. So I know there's a lot there, but I find this discussion really, really interesting, and I think it's very important because health is so important economically and socially and everything. It's so important for us to have this panel discussion here as part of the forum that we're in. So there are really good things happening, but there are a lot of people being left behind. and your help would be really appreciated in addressing those types of things.
So let me just talk to the question about centralization and the provision of care in centralized locations. We actually have dealt with that in Cleveland Clinic because we have when I came there 21 years ago, we were one hospital, and then over the course of quite a few years, we've acquired or developed relationships with 10 other hospitals. And we had the same issues in terms of, everybody, a lot of people wanted to come to main campus. That's where where all the specialists were. And we've actually done a fair bit of decentralization so that certain things that we do extraordinarily well are not done at main campus. In fact, Tom's area, orthopedics, a lot of that is provided at other hospitals. And so we have now tried to ensure that some of the local hospitals, which are not that strong, weren't as strong in the specialty areas, that maybe they have a specialty that they really have taken off and do very well. And that's allowed us to sort of move beds so that, the sickest of the sick can come to main campus and we have the beds for them. But then as they get better, they can be moved out to the local hospital, maybe for rehabilitation or whatever. And I'm not saying that it's perfect. But it's probably the way of the future. I mean, I think in Ireland, and it's great because it's not that big a system, and so you can afford to be, what Ireland needs are people to be, thoughtful and open about that. That maybe not everything can be provided in certain areas, but also that not everything should be congregated in one hospital. So that University Hospital Galway, great hospital, but maybe that not all of the services are provided just there, that maybe that certain things will be moved to, for instance, another hospital where there isn't as big a call for beds. And so I think, you have to think of all of these things as resources that you utilize. One of the problems I think in everywhere, in Ireland here, is the provision of transportation. So, I have to say, my visits to Mayo, I think the roads are better in Mayo than they are in any other county in Ireland. I don't know if that was P. Flynn when he was the European Commissioner or what, but they're amazingly good compared to. I spent a lot of my time in North Clare as well. And believe me, if you think it takes probably as long to get from North Clare to Galway as it does from Balmutta, because the roads are even worse. But I think when people are looking at care systems, they have to think about transportation, and that's one of the things we've done too. Is that we have had to take on some thoughts as to how we get patients in from peripheral hospitals into our main hospital. It's expensive. I mean, it's using often helicopters or fixed-wing aircraft if we have to. But that's the cost of doing that kind of business. And I think the same is true in Ireland. I think if the government needs to make provision, or whoever is in charge of the healthcare needs to make provision for that. I think maybe, Tom, you could talk to, what's happening with pharmaceuticals in. Let me just say that the pharmaceutical industry is in a little bit of a funk in certain areas because it's finding it hard to get. They have a development chain. They usually like to know about 10 or 20 years ahead of time what they're going to what are going to be their blockbusters, and that's becoming harder. And part of the reason is that healthcare or health is getting better in cardiovascular disease. People aren't dying, thankfully, as much when I started in cardiology, 1 in 4 people died of a heart attack. Now it's about 1 in 20. I mean, not to say that they don't eventually succumb from heart disease, but they don't die acutely. And so, and we've gotten a lot tougher on them to say, you know, does that drug work or not? And so to show that, you know, something is effective to reduce the death rate from 1 in 4 to, you know, to 1 in whatever is a lot easier than to show that it goes from 1 in 20 to 1 in 25. And you need an awful lot more patients in clinical trials to do that. And so it's gotten very expensive for drug companies. And so it's becoming harder for them to provide the research that, you know, will show a real benefit. And, you know, maybe I'll turn it over to Tom and talk about some of the issues around that and around, you know, one of the things, patent protection, which is only you know, so many years after a drug has been introduced, they only get what, it's 15 years? 17 years.
Yeah. So first of all, your comments about point of care optimization is a struggle probably every municipality, every country is always going to have. And I do think that that's going to be a critical component of our future network of provision of care. I think the whole pharmaceutical industry is one of the most difficult to characterize and operate in our country and around the world. Huge investments, huge risk, small success rates. That's why you're seeing the migration of almost all investment in pharma go to cancer drugs. Yet I will say that for the first time I felt a wind of optimism blow through this. And interestingly, it's coming from our colleagues who are the brightest economists. I just met with a man named Andrew Lowe, who last year was our one of our Time Magazine's 100 most influential people. He's at the MIT Sloan School, and he's become a good friend. His concept is if 20 to 25% of the U.S. population takes as little as $3,000 from their IRA, their retirement accounts, he can cure cancer. A mega fund concept. So that would create about, depends, between $5 and $15 billion. And instead of a private funding and industrial funding of pharma specifically, maybe largely our whole innovation ecosystem, but pharma specifically, we have to start looking at alternative mechanisms. So I'd say stay tuned on that. It's being recognized that the amount of investment, the relatively short longevity of patent protection, the risks and liabilities associated with medications. You know, we're all our own laboratory. I could take a medicine and it could be safe and effective. You could take the same one, it could be toxic. So it's a very unusual and unique development ecosystem. I will say one thing too about patent. You're seeing our world in device and other protectable intellectual properties move toward first securing the CE mark. That's another thing around which we're collaborating greatly with Europe and specifically Ireland. We think that our regulatory process, there's nobody here from our FDA, is there? I need to watch out because if I'm quoted because of what my business card says, I could get in trouble. That we are looking to prove efficacy without maybe the sometimes thought as overly arduous barriers that exist. We have in development many innovations, some drugs, some devices, that we believe could be very impactful for individuals in our world. Yet sometimes their access to them is limited by these overarching concepts that were put in for safety purposes. But you know, that balance always of public safety and advancing the ability to care is a very narrow hinge. So challenging to make one arching statement, but I hope that gives some optimism.
John Garvey, Mayo Society of New York. Dr. Graham, you mentioned the remote treatment of patients, with use of advanced technology. What about the remote training of doctors? Doctors in Ireland tell me that they must have exposure to American medical treatment to be fully qualified. So, and many of them come over here, and of course some of them do not go back. One person I know. Is there any program existing that addresses that issue, you know, between Ireland and over here? So for example, you know, operating tables and so on, you know, being remotely accessed, you know, by or remotely viewed by doctors in Ireland.
I'm not sure I can come up with a specific example involving our two countries. Yet the concepts of simulation centers and communication through those kind of technologies is fascinating. And we at Cleveland Clinic are taking a real leadership role around the innovation in education concepts. We're doing it as we're co-locating the Case Western Reserve Medical School on our campus, how we do team building between all types of caregivers, nurses, technicians, physicians, and also leveraging technology as an enabler. I think some of the greatest advances are going to come through these simulation opportunities. We just had a transaction here of a portfolio company that we helped develop, and happened to be Israeli initially, called Symbionics, which is a leader in the sim world. I think that there's going to be great benefit. Brian and I trained on people. We learned directly at the bedside. We're now seeing virtual cadavers from the medical school perspective, and these simulation centers giving individuals opportunity to manage different scenarios of great sophistication with mannequins that have practically every variable taken into account. I see no reason why that can't be across the street, across the ocean. So if I were to look at one thing that is probably going to unite medical education going forward, is going to be probably the technology sharing. You know, what comes to mind is, are you familiar with the Khan Academy? Essentially it's taken even sophisticated, you know, university teachings like physics, etc., and put it online for free, by the way. And I think now the Microsoft, the Bill and Melinda Gates philanthropy arm funds it, KHAN. But I can see no reason why we can't look toward addressing what we are concerned about as a significant physician shortfall. You probably have better statistics than I. I keep hearing 30,000 physician shortfall by 2025. By expanding our capabilities through teaching with simulation, and then alternatively touching patients through technology whose case would allow that. I hope that's an adequate answer.
Yeah, I think, I think, Tom, that's a great answer. Yeah, I think, there is, the great advantage of Ireland is probably the access for physicians and training to patients. Actually, that can be more difficult in other areas, particularly in countries like Germany. And there's probably only so much you can do by simulation, but what makes a great system or a great medical center is, it's probably a sense of mission. And maybe one of the great things about going anywhere, is you get a sense of what that mission is, and that you can do it. And that's what probably, I think the reason why it's good for them to travel. It's probably good for U.S. medical students to go to Europe. They used to do it a lot more than they do now, is because you see how different systems work, and you see the advantages of that. But
well, I was remiss in not recognizing your contributions to training. What % of the cardiologists in Ireland right now?
Probably about 20% of them.
That's astounding.
I said 20% of the good ones anyway.
100% of the good ones. But there's a situation where they return to Ireland.
Sure.
They sought your expertise as a clinician and educator, and they return to serve their population.
Yeah, I think that's what we should be doing. I think the idea is that we want people to go back to serve their own communities as much as possible.
just to speak to this point, I think I mirror the excitement of Cynthia. Being from Cleveland State University, and we are in the process of building the NeoMed facility, it is exciting to be able to partner with organizations like Mayo for our students that are here to actually go back once they receive their training. So that's the exciting part for us as students coming to a conference like this, and just really realizing the symbiotic relationships that are going to take place in the opportunity. So I thank the panel for sharing your stories, and not so much a question, but a statement that I'm so very excited that we're able to do these things, and maybe our students will come, get the education that they need, and then go back. So I'm excited, and I thank you.
Thanks very much. Let me just say that my wife teaches nursing at Case Western, and she has had some of her students going to Ireland to get to do some projects. In fact, she has had a number of young nurses go to Galway, a number who have worked with the Travellers in Tuam on a project. Been fantastic, and they actually those young nurses came back here. Their project won the award at the nursing award ceremony, and what they learned about healthcare and about different challenges in Ireland is fantastic. But that's what a lot of U.S. trainees want to go abroad. In fact, in colleges and universities, they're encouraged to go abroad. And Ireland is probably the number one place that they want to go. And sometimes it's hard to provide those spots for them. And I think, in terms of something that Ireland can provide is, this study abroad program for students. Typically it's been people of Irish descent, but actually, increasingly people who are not of Irish descent, maybe even of Scottish descent, want to go to Ireland because it's considered a safe place for students to go. The apocryphal story is that two American parents were in Ireland and at the airport in Shannon, and the child got lost, and the wife is very worried, but the husband says to the wife, "Don't worry, honey, you can't get off the island." And I think a lot of people have that sense about Ireland, where I think it's one of the things that people in Ireland should really, that's a real growth area, because education is huge. It's a huge part of what goes on here. And I think people do want an overseas experience, and we want Irish students here too. And we've actually had students from Achill here a number of years ago, which was fantastic. A number of secondary school students, and I think that kind of interchange is very important for development and for the future.
Brian, can you do it from Mayo? Fundraising is a huge issue, and I know for Richard and Cynthia in Ireland in the last 12 months, the fundraising industry has gone through a huge challenge. To what extent have you been able to harness the diaspora? I suppose is one question. And what are the innovations that you're seeing really coming in the fundraising side? Because if you look at your budgets, they're not massive. For everyone in Mayo, the 130,000 that are, I think, Richard, your budget would be €11 per head for the year, which doesn't sound huge. But how is it that we can get people to pay more, and what are the innovations that you're seeing there?
Do you want to go, Richard? Well, yes, it's a very relevant question, and I suppose any of you who are from Ireland here will know, and I mean many of you will have heard that there was a lot of controversy in the whole area of charity. And I've actually been appointed to the board of the new Charity Regulatory Authority, which we're just becoming official as from the 16th of October. But I suppose what's incredibly important for all charities is that they have to be seen to be open and transparent, and so that people, when they give, they can feel safe and secure that the money that they're giving is going to be used for the purpose for which they intended it. So that's the first thing we have to do, is to actually reassure the public that they're giving and it is going to where they intended it to go. Because we've been delayed in developing our inpatient facilities for so long, we were actually very healthy. So we had a very strong reserve fund. And it was very difficult for us to go out and to attempt to move beyond the confines of our two counties, looking for a fund. So we have never actually really appealed to the diaspora. But I know I met a lovely gentleman down there from Philadelphia, Sean, and I know that the Mayo associations from various parts have been supportive to us in the past and have helped and contributed. But yes, we are going to have to make a greater appeal because, as I say, we have to lift our income now from 1.3 million annually up to over 2 million a year, which is a big ask for us from a small population. So even today, anybody here, if you can't give financially, if you can maybe even talk to me and give me contacts or links or ideas or some way that can help us to achieve our goal of having what needs to be done in Mayo. And you asked, where will we be in 5 years' time? I sincerely hope that when you all come home to Mayo, that I'll be saying, I'd like to take you on a guided tour of our state-of-the-art hospice, and that we just have this tremendous gift to the people. And if people here would like to help us to make that a reality, I would be so delighted to hear from them. Does that answer your question?
And the same with us. We know at Cancer Care West, when I looked at our funding, state funding is just going to drop and drop for us, and yet on the other side of that fence we have a huge growth in the people we serve. Cancer is going to double and the radiotherapy unit is going to open, and we see that coming out. So we're going to have to rely more on fundraising. And the thing about Mayo is, although our centres are based in Galway, we have to get the message out to Mayo people, for instance, that 1 in 3 of the people that come to our doors are from Mayo. But yeah, I mean, it's getting tougher and tougher. Hopefully, if the economy picks up, as we said, the last 6 or 7 years have been horrific, and then we've got the scandals with the charities, and it has made it much more difficult. But what it has is pushed everybody into an area of transparency, which is only good. And the good charities will prosper from that. So I think the obligation is people want to see where their money is spent, and I can show them in Yeshiva, and I can show them in a support centre and see the people we help and how we help them. But we're probably just in a space that we know that fundraising and issue of donors is going to go more and more. State funding for what we do, although we save the state huge money, because we can calculate that a night in bed in a hospital in Galway is about $3,000. It's about €100 to stay in Sullivan, and we take people out of the hospital. Sometimes that just gets lost, and it doesn't resonate with the government about funding and that. They don't want to hear it. They're just filling beds, and there is a shortage of beds in University Hospital in Galway. Having all the cancer centres there, they just can't go. So they're the challenges faced, and that's the opportunity today, is to meet people from all over Mayo to tell them our story, probably how we help Mayo people. We just hope for some support, but it's just to get the message out there.
One last question.
Yeah, this is more of a statement. My family has experienced both the hospice and the cancer. I'm Sean McMahon of the Mayo Association of Philadelphia, and we feel very honoured that we've been supporting the Roscommon Hospice, so other societies. But I do compliment the service that I experienced last year with the palliative care, and I also had experience with my brother-in-law in Galway with cancer treatment. So this is the good stories. I know, I mean, we need a lot more help, but again, thank you for what you're doing over there, and we hope to continue to support. And I've been asked to also add the cancer centre to one of our charities.
Great. Well, listen, thanks everybody for being here. Thanks to all the participants for being here. It's been a very enjoyable panel, at least on my behalf. So thank you all for being for your attention.